Hello, my name is music teacher Kate. Congratulations, you've made it to lesson 10 of the music theory series. Woohoo! In this video, we aim to demystify written music a bit. First, we need to talk about the musical staff. The musical staff is composed of 5 lines and 4 spaces. The way that we number these lines is line number 1, line number 2, line number 3, line number 4, line number 5. The spaces, space number 1, space number 2, space number 3, space number 4. So we have 5 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4. The musical staff can be likened to a mathematical graph where the x-axis measures time and the y-axis measures pitch. If I put a whole note right here on line number 1, and then I put a whole note here on space number 1, and then I put a whole note here on space number 4, and then I put a whole note here on line number 3. I can see, looking at my graph or my musical staff, that this pitch is the lowest pitch, and this pitch is the highest pitch written of all the pitches on this musical staff. I also see that this pitch will occur before this pitch, which will occur before this pitch, which will occur before this pitch, because of where they're placed in time. We know what the musical staff looks like. We know how time and pitch are measured on the musical staff. Now, how do we know specifically what pitches we are dealing with when we look at notes on the musical staff? This is where clefs come in. The treble clef can also be called the G clef because the specific pitch that the treble clef assigns to the second line of the musical staff, that line that it circles, the only line that it circles, that is the G line. The musical alphabet alternates lines and spaces moving up and down any musical staff. So here in the treble clef, if we know that the second line is G, then we know that the space above G is A. We know that the line above A would be B, and the space above B would be C, and the line above C would be D, and the space above D would be E, and the line above E would be F. We also know that if we step down from G, that first space will also be an F, and then our bottom line stepping down from F will be an E. Us music teachers, we're a little zany, and we come up with all sorts of helpful hints to help you remember your notes. You may notice that the treble clef spaces spell face, F-A-C-E, face in the space. That's a good one. The line notes of the treble clef are a little less approachable, and so we tend to use acronyms to help us. My personal favorite is every good bee deserves flowers. G clef, ain't that the truth?
This is middle C, a ledger line below treble clef. In this line of written music, we see the notes moving from treble G, down to F, down to E, down past the treble clef staff to D, and extending it even further with a ledger line down to middle C.
We haven't talked about middle C since lesson 1 on pitch, when we learned that middle C was the 4th C from the bottom of a full-size piano keyboard. Out of 8 total Cs, if you count Cs from the bottom, C1, C2, C3, C4, C4 will bring you middle C every time. Middle C is the C that vibrates at 261.6 Hertz. Middle C is a very important C, because it will serve as a fantastic reference point for reading music on the musical staff, regardless of the clef you're working with. The bass clef can also be called the F clef because the fourth line of the bass clef staff, which runs through the two dots of the bass clef sign, is the F line. If we know that this is the F line and we also know how our pitches move on the musical staff, we can figure the rest of this out. F steps down to E. E steps down to D. D steps down to C. C steps down to B. B steps down to A. A steps down to G. And then above F, we would have G, and this line up top would be A. Yes, of course, there are also tricks for remembering our line notes and space notes in the bass clef staff. Some teachers like to say, all cows eat grass. Some teachers like to say, all cats eat goldfish. I like to remember ace, G. If it works for you, it works for me. The only one I'll teach you for the lines is my personal favorite, groovy, booties, deserve, funk, always. Oh yeah, funky F clef. Say I write a note here on the F line, and then I write a note here, skipping the G space going up to the A line. And then maybe I write a note sitting right on top of the bass clef staff. Well, that's a B. If this is an A, then this is a B. And then maybe I decide to extend my bass clef staff using ledger lines. This is middle C, ding, 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 C4. The grand staff takes the treble clef staff and the bass clef staff and joins them together with this brace. This is middle C. Middle C is the exact middle point between treble clef and bass clef in the grand staff. Treble G steps down to F, steps down to E, steps down to D, steps down to middle C. Bass clef F steps up to G, steps up to A, steps up to B, steps up to middle C. On the grand staff, everything is pretty relative to middle C. You know what middle C is, right? You know where it is, you know how to find it on your instrument? Good. So far, we've looked at the treble clef and the bass clef, how those clefs assign pitches to the musical staff, and how the pitches move from there. We've also joined the treble clef with the bass clef in order to form the grand staff, which is kind of the ultimate destination for reading music. That being said, there are other clefs. The next two clefs we'll look at are the alto clef and the tenor clef. The alto clef and the tenor clef look almost exactly the same. The difference is that they highlight a different line of the musical staff. So in the alto clef, we see that this point comes to line number 3. What that tells us is that middle C is line number 3 on the alto clef. So C, D, E, F, G. The top line of the alto clef is treble G. C, B, A, G, F. The bottom line of the alto clef is bass clef F. The tenor clef moves middle C to line number 4. I'm not going to tell you that these clefs are obscure because they're not obscure if you are a bassoon player. That being said, if you're new to music theory, new to reading music, I recommend prioritizing the treble clef and the bass clef for memorization. Practice, get a sound understanding of how the musical pitches are moving on the musical staff. We're on the way to musical literacy.